Welcome to the very first of a new series here on the Deep Dive. We're going to get right into everything you need to know if you're thinking about building your own home in India.
Yeah, that's right.
Over the next 9 deep dives, we're basically pulling apart all the crucial steps. We're drawing from some really insightful guides, especially helpful if you're building in Maharashtra or South India.
Hmm.
Think of this as, your path to getting a really solid handle on what it actually takes, going from just that idea to, well, living in your own place.
Exactly.
Hmm.
We've looked through a lot of info to help you, you listening, who's maybe thinking about building to move forward with confidence, not just dreaming about it, but understanding what it really takes to even get started.
Yeah.
This whole series is about breaking down each piece and making it, clear and actionable.
And you know what? Today, we're not even jumping into fancy designs or picking out wall colors yet.
No, not yet.
This first deep dive is all about laying the groundwork. The really essential stuff you absolutely need to sort out before you even glance at a blueprint.
Crucial stuff.
Making sure you're genuinely ready for what is, let's face it, a pretty significant project. Okay, so let's unpack this. What's the absolute first thing someone needs to get their head around?
I would say number one has to be a really honest, hard look at your finances.
Well,
And I mean, really looking beyond just the cost of the plot itself. That's just the start. You need a crystal clear picture of the total project cost.
right, because it's so easy to fixate on the land price, but that's just like the entry fee, isn't it?
Exactly.
What are some of those other big cost areas people need to factor in right away?
Well, okay, after the land, you've got your architect and design fees. And honestly, investing properly there can save you money down the line.
Good point.
Then there's all the permissions, the approvals from local authorities that can add up. Site preparation too. You got to get the land ready. And sometimes that throws up surprises.
Surprises. Like what?
Well, depending on where you are, you might run into tricky soil. For instance, in parts of the Deccan Plateau, you get this black cotton soil.
Black cotton soil. Okay, what's tricky about it?
Well, the thing is, it behaves really strangely with water. It swells up like a lot when it gets wet monsoon season, and then it shrinks dramatically when it dries out. Imagine that happening under your house season after season.
Wow. Okay, that sounds like it could cause problems.
Big problems. If your foundation isn't designed specifically for that kind of movement, you can end up with cracks, structural issues. So if you're building in one of those areas, you have to know about it and budget for the right foundation. It might be more expensive initially.
Definitely something you wouldn't want to discover later when cracks appear.
For sure. We've seen it happen. It can really blow the budget if you haven't planned for it.
Okay, so that's site prep. What else after that?
Then you've got the actual construction cost. Bricks, cement, labor, all of that. That's obviously a huge chunk. And then basic interiors to just make the place habitable.
Right. So with all these costs adding up, potentially with surprises like the soil, how should people listening be thinking about funding all this?
Yeah, good question. It's usually a mix. Your own savings are likely going to be a big part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Construction loans are common. But it's important to know these often work differently from a standard home loan you might get for a ready-built house.
How so?
Typically, the bank releases the money in stages, like linked to construction milestones being completed, not all up front.
Okay, got it.
And, for many families in India, contributions from relatives, from family can also be part of the funding mix.
And what about planning for? Well, the things you can't plan for. I imagine building projects rarely go perfectly smoothly.
You were absolutely right. Things always come up. That's why having a contingency fund isn't just like a nice idea. It's non-negotiable. Seriously.
How much are we talking?
You need a buffer. A good rule of thumb is aiming for, say, 10 to 15% of your total estimated project cost.
10 to 15%.
Yeah. Think of it as your safety net. Maybe material prices shoot up unexpectedly. Supply chain issues, who knows?
Yeah.
Or you dig into the ground and find something you weren't expecting that needs dealing with. That buffer makes those bumps manageable, not a full-blown crisis for your project.
Okay, so get your finances sorted, understand all the costs, and absolutely have that contingency fund. That's step one, loud and clear. What's the next big piece people need to consider?
The next massive thing is your time commitment.
Time.
Yeah. Building a home isn't like buying one off the shelf.
Yeah.
It demands a really significant and sustained chunk of your time and energy. You almost need to think of it like taking on a second job for a period.
A second job. Wow. Okay, that paints a picture. What kind of involvement does that actually mean for someone building?
Oh, you'll be in lots of meetings,
Yeah.
discussions with your architect, your structural engineer, the contractor, the build team.
Right.
There are countless decisions to make. Big ones, like the overall layout, down to tiny details like fittings and finishes.
Mm-hmm.
You'll need to visit the site regularly, check progress, make sure things are happening as planned, check the quality.
Yeah, you want to see it happening.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's all the paperwork, managing documents, tracking costs against the budget, making payments when they're due. It's ongoing.
And I bet those initial timelines you get quoted can sometimes be a bit hopeful.
That is a very common issue, yes.
Mhm.
Optimistic timelines. It's so important to have realistic expectations.
Okay.
The design phase itself might take longer than you think as you tweak things. Getting approvals from the authorities, that can be a long process, and it varies a lot depending on where you are.
Right, bureaucracy.
Then the construction itself.
Yeah.
It happens in stages.
Yeah.
You've got potential weather delays. Monsoons can halt work. Material availability sometimes becomes an issue. Labor sometimes. Even the final finishing touches can drag on.
So patience is key. And building buffer time into the schedule, just like with money.
Absolutely. Just as vital as the financial buffer. Be realistic, be patient.
So it's not just finding the hours, it's also having the mental energy, the bandwidth to handle all this on top of everything else in life.
Precisely. You need a really honest chat with yourself and with anyone else involved in making decisions, like your spouse or family. How much time do we really have? What's our energy level like right now?
Yeah.
Building is amazing, it's rewarding, but it's demanding. Everyone needs to be ready for that commitment, which could easily be over a year, maybe more.
That leads nicely into the whole decision-making aspect. With families involved, I can see how different opinions could, well, complicate things. How do you manage that?
That's a really, really important point. You need clear roles right from the beginning.
Okay.
Define who the main decision makers are for different parts of the project, maybe. Doesn't mean you ignore everyone else's input. Getting different ideas is good.
Sure.
But ultimately, someone needs to make the final call to keep things moving. You need a clear process for that.
And how do you balance what you dream of having versus what the budget actually allows? That needs versus wants thing must be tough.
Oh, yeah. That needs versus wants discussion is critical. And it needs to happen early.
Before you fall in love with expensive ideas.
Exactly. Sit down. Really separate the must-haves, the absolute essentials for how you live, from the nice-to-haves, the desirable extras.
Right.
Having that clarity helps so much when you talk to the architect, when you're making choices later, and it ties right back to that detailed budget you made. It keeps things grounded.
So listen to everyone, gather ideas, but the main decision makers need the final say, probably guided by their architect or builder.
That's the ideal way. Get professional advice, consider family input, but have that clear structure for who makes the final decision. It prevents delays, reduces frustration, keeps the project on track, and helps stick to the budget.
Okay, practicality covered. Money, time, decisions. But building a house must be an emotional roller coaster too, right? What about mental prep?
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely an emotional journey, highs and lows, which is why building up some mental resilience beforehand is pretty important.
You know what I mean?
You need a marathon mindset, not a sprint. Think long term. There will be really exciting moments seeing walls go up, but there will also be challenges, delays, unexpected costs, things not going quite right.
Yeah.
Patience, perspective, they're key for navigating those bumps.
And I imagine decision fatigue must be a real thing. So many choices over such a long time.
It is absolutely real. Be aware of it. The sheer number of decisions, big structural ones down to like doorknob styles, it can be overwhelming. It can lead to burnout.
So what can you do?
Acknowledge it's possible. Try to pace yourselves. Maybe tackle decisions in batches. Set deadlines for certain choices so they don't pile up. And again, a good architect can help streamline this, present options clearly.
Makes sense. And I guess you also have to be ready for plans to change sometimes. Things don't always go perfectly to script.
Flexibility is like a superpower in home building.
Yeah.
Seriously. Be prepared for adjustments. Maybe a material you wanted isn't available anymore or takes too long to get, or, like we said, site conditions force a change in foundation design. Being adaptable, open to alternatives, makes it much less stressful.
And lastly, you're relying heavily on your team, architect, engineers, builder. That relationship must be crucial.
Fundamental. Building strong, trusting, collaborative relationships with your whole team is so important.
Yeah.
You're all aiming for the same thing, your home. Open communication, mutual respect, actually listening to their expertise. It just makes the whole process smoother, less stressful, and leads to a better outcome.
Okay, wow. So before you even dream about room layouts, you need solid finances with a buffer, a realistic view of the time needed, clear decision making, the right mindset, and good relationships. That's quite a checklist already. Anything else right at this very early stage?
Yes, one more really crucial thing to touch on right at the start: basic legal awareness, particularly about the land itself.
Ha, the legal side.
Even before you get attached to a plot, you absolutely must check it's legally sound and actually zoned for residential building.
And this is where things like NA status come in, especially in Maharashtra.
Exactly right. In Maharashtra, a lot of land might initially be classified as agricultural. To build a house legally, you typically need this non-agricultural order, the NA order. It permits the change in land use.
So you need to know about this early on.
You need a basic grasp of it, yes. Start asking about the land's status right away when you're looking. And it's worth remembering, while NA status is specific to Maharashtra, other states in South India will have similar processes for land use conversion. You need to check the local rules wherever you plan to build.
Because trying to build where you're not supposed to sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Huge headaches. Building on improperly zoned land or land without a clear title, it can lead to massive delays, expensive legal fights, and worst case, you could lose a lot of money.
Yeah, I don't want that.
So just that initial check, that awareness of the legal basics regarding the land, is a critical part of being truly ready.
Okay, so let's quickly recap this first stage then. Getting ready to build your home in India, whether Maharashtra, South India, wherever. You, financial readiness, understanding the total cost, having that contingency.
Yep.
Time commitment readiness, knowing it's like a second job. Decision-making readiness, clear roles, managing needs versus wants. Mental readiness, that marathon mindset, flexibility. And finally, initial legal awareness, checking that land status before you buy.
That's a great summary. It might sound like a lot to think about up front.
It does feel like a lot.
But honestly, doing this self-assessment, getting this foundation right, it sets you up for a much smoother, more successful experience building your actual home. It's a foundational work for the whole project.
And this is really just the beginning of our series of deep dives. Next time, we're going to zoom right in on how to analyze potential plots before you decide to buy.
Yeah, looking beyond just the size and price.
What else do you need to consider to make sure that piece of land is actually right for the home you want to build and the life you want to live there?
Exactly. Making sure it works functionally, legally, and for your vision.
So for now, we really hope you'll take some time to think about these readiness points we discussed. Maybe start roughing out a budget, a realistic timeline. Give some thought to that needs versus wants list.
Definitely worthwhile exercises.
And on that note, here's a final question for you to mull over. What's one aspect of home building readiness that maybe you hadn't fully considered until now? Think about that and join us for our next deep dive as we continue guiding you on building your dream home in India.